SOT is a therapy that we use to treat patients with chronic Lyme disease. It's also a therapy that can be used for other things as well, such as viral infections, cancer, and other disease processes as well. It stands for supportive oligonucleotide therapy. It can also stand for small oligonucleotide or supportive oligonucleotide technique. This is a technique that's been around for a while, and again, you can click on the link that will put here up on the screen to give you a little more information about the whole process of what SOT is and how it works. I'll give you just a tiny bit today to kind of re-explain if you haven't watched that video and you don't have the time to go watch it. Essentially what it is, an oligonucleotide is a strand of genetic material. In this case, it's a strand of RNA. And what it does is it takes a small strand of RNA and uses that to bind to a piece of RNA within a cell, essentially silencing that gene. So it is not genetic therapy as you might think. It's not altering genetics. There is no altering of DNA. All it's simply doing is keeping that particular gene from expressing what it's supposed to express. And when you do it in a very specific way, you can actually target cells that you don't want to survive. And that's how they initially developed it in treating cancer, and have now branched into treating infections with this specific technique as well. So as far as some questions that we've had, the first question actually I already answered for you was, what does it stand for? There was a particular comment on the last video that very vehemently disagreed with my take on small oligonucleotide. And to be honest, they are right that there is other names for it. That's just one of them, and the most common one we talked about here today. Another thing that got brought up in the previous video was how dangerous it could be to use genetic therapy. I would reiterate to that point that this is not necessarily genetic therapy. We, again, this does not alter the genetics of an individual. So it's made very specifically so that this particular piece of RNA can only bind with a very specific strand of RNA that's produced either by a cancer cell or by a bacteria or a virus. So this kind of goes into the third question that we've had is about whether or not this is a safe therapy, side effects and things like that. And to be completely honest with you, this has been a very safe treatment for patients. We have not had any patients that have done this that have had any significant side effects whatsoever. And because of the way that it's targeted, it's not going to have a detrimental effect on the human body. It will not affect the other cells. It's not to say that you can't have a response to it that makes you feel worse at first, just like you would with any type of chronic Lyme treatment. And we call that a Herxheimer reaction. I don't think I've ever made a video on that. I could probably do that one of these days just to get that information out there. I know it's out there, but anytime we can share more, that's always better. So that certainly does happen with SOT treatment, but the treatment in and of itself, the actual infusion and the molecule that is used to treat is very, very safe. So let's talk about the study. The study that was done was published back in October of last year, and it was a small, kind of more of a pilot type of a study, but it is the first of its kind. It's the first study that I'm aware of where SOT was actually studied in patients with Lyme disease. And in this case, they actually did Lyme disease and viral infections targeting Epstein-Barr virus and Borrelia burgdorferi, which is the classic bacteria that causes Lyme disease. So what they found was that the majority of patients that received SOT, a significant amount, and it was statistically significant amount, had a reduction in their Lyme, overall Lyme picture with 1 or 2 SOT treatments. When it comes to the viral infections, they found that it was after 2 or 3 treatments that they saw an impact. And so I think that's really important and interesting is that with viral infections, you're not going to expect to have a result after the first treatment. And in this particular study, they showed that it took at least 2 treatments to see that. With Lyme, they did have some results after the first treatment in a number of patients, but there was also a number that needed 2 treatments to make it better. So that also, along with some of the clinical experience that I've seen, the most common thing that I've seen is that the patients that are responding to SOT and getting better are typically patients that are having either more than one SOT, whether it be for the same or different organisms, in cases with co-infections, or on top of that, they're also doing additional treatments. So SOT is one of the treatments that is being done, but not the only treatment that is being done. So I do think that there is a big role for SOT with Lyme treatment. It's just that alone, one SOT is probably not going to be enough to do it. So going into it, number one, we need to be thinking this is probably going to take a couple of rounds of this to get better. Number two, we need to make sure that we're addressing other aspects of Lyme and co-infections, and that we're not just putting all our eggs in that one basket. But very promising, and to see a study come out on this is always really exciting. Of course, it's a small study, it's a pilot study, it's not something that we can hang our hat on at this point, but it only is the start. And I think going forward, we'll continue to see more and more of these.